What's up, YouTube? Today, I want to do something a little different. Now, I normally review movies or like wrestling events, but today I'm going to change it up a little bit here. Today, I want to review an episode from, in my opinion, what is an absolute awesome TV show that I watched when I was growing up. I want to review an episode of Tales from the Crypt, and this episode is entitled Fitting Punishment. So let's get right into the review. Now, from what I've read online, this is the very first Tales from the Crypt episode to feature an all-black cast. I mean, this really shouldn't have to be something that I should have to point out, but, you know, I'll take it. It's pretty cool. Now, this episode of Tales from the Crypt, it's based from the EC Comics Vault of Horror number 16. I have not actually read this comic, although I have seen a YouTube video of it. And from what I've seen in the comic, I believe the funeral director's name is still Ezra, but I think the main character of the comic, I don't believe his name was Bobby. I believe in the comic the name might have been Stanley or something like that. I don't know. I saw the video maybe a month ago. But just, you know, kind of give you guys an update. This is it's not a lot different from the comic, this episode, but there are some slight changes. I've never read the comic, so I'm just going by what I saw on YouTube. Now, the director of this episode is Jack Shoulder. However, apparently the writer of this episode, get this, is Don Mancini, the creator of the Child's Play franchise. That is a very interesting fact. So now that I've got that out of the way, I guess we can get to the plot of this episode. Now, the plot of this episode. Our main character is Ezra Thornberry, played by Moses Gunn. This guy has been in quite a few films here. I know he was in The Women of Rooster Place. I believe he was in, I want to say he might have been in a few episodes of Good Times. He was in Firestarter. Yeah, a pretty talented guy, to be honest with you. Anyway, in this episode of Tales from the Crypt, he plays a mean and very stingy, very snotty funeral director. When we open up this episode, a funeral is going on. There is a guy who gets out of a truck and is bouncing a basketball, kind of dribbling the ball, and he heads into the funeral home. Now, we actually find out that this is Ezra's nephew, Bobby. So Bobby walks into the funeral, and as the funeral is wrapping up, Bobby approaches Ezra and asks him if he remembers him, and Ezra delivers the line of, "Thank the merciful Lord, no." So we can tell right off the back that this guy is very, very snotty. And also, as the funeral is over, he tells Bobby, "Hey boy, the party's over, get out of here." And then when Bobby's like, "Party?" Ezra's like, "The viewing, you idiot." So, I mean, right off the bat, we already know this guy's going to be a complete dick. So, when Ezra asks Bobby what he's actually doing there, this is when we find out that Bobby has lost both his parents in a vehicle accident. Ezra is the brother of Bobby's mother. So, Bobby informs Ezra that he's his nephew and that Ezra is his only living kin. He shows him the papers that shows that that's all legal. And, Ezra reads it and he's kind of like, "You must really think I'm made of money, boy. The last thing I need is another mouth to feed," which, I get it. Times were probably hard back then too. Although we find out later that this guy is actually a huge cheat when it comes to money. But, Bobby tells him, I'm not going to be a problem, Uncle Ezra. I'll clean up, I'll wash your floor, I'll do whatever you ask. which kind of gains Ezra's interest. But it turns out that Ezra just wants to use his nephew as basically like free work, help with his funeral service. But tells Bobby he won't be getting paid for it. He was just like, you'll get a room and board. Crazy thing about this is when Ezra takes Bobby to the room he'll be staying in, Bobby don't even get a bed. He does not even get a bed. Like, he's laying on one of them things where it's like you would put a dead body. And just tells him, put some bedding on it. It'll be just fine. But I'm like, this is insane. And, as Bobby gets settled in, we find out that Ezra doesn't even want him to turn on any lights or anything because he's a cheap ass. He's like, oh, leave the lights alone, boy, stuff like that. And then when he's telling his nephew about the funeral business, he goes over to the coffin of the lady he just held the funeral service for, and he pulls out her damn gold tooth and puts it in his pocket. So we know that this guy, Ezra, we know that this cat is not going to be likable at all. But, you got to have that in Tales from the Crypt. You have to have that. You got to have a couple of unlikable characters in Tales from the Crypt most of the time. But for this episode, that's not the case. And I will get into that a little later. Now, Ezra's cruelty just continues throughout this episode. Like I said, he teaches Bobby about the funeral business. But he's cutting corners like crazy. I mean, this guy is using water instead of embalming fluid to put inside the bodies. And Bobby actually calls him out on this. And the uncle just gets pissed. He's like, oh, well, he's dead, you damn fool. He doesn't know the difference anyway. And then he's talking about how chemicals cost money. And I mean, this guy's cheapness is insane. But what's crazy about this is this guy will constantly pull quotes from the Bible just to kind of back up his cheapness. I mean, did this guy ever even read the Bible? Because he says a quote in here that wasn't even in the Bible. It was something that Ben Franklin said. It had something to do with saving money, which Bobby calls him out on also, and he receives a slap to the head. Now, as this episode goes on, I mean, Ezra is just continuing to be a dick the whole episode. He tells Bobby in one scene, oh boy, you're about as stupid as your mama. Mind you, Bobby's mom is dead. Ezra is also not nice to his organ player, guy by the name of Clyde. There's an incident where Ezra actually takes the piano cover and slams him right on Clyde's fingers. So Bobby is not the only one being treated bad here. Then we get to another scene where a coffin is shipped to the funeral home. And when the guys show up, their reason for being late is they got stuck in traffic. And you get Ezra yeah, stuck in traffic, my ass. So Bobby asks him, why is there Chinese writing on the box that they got to open for the casket? And Ezra's like, made in Taiwan, you dummy. Half the price of U.S. made. They're 6 inches shorter, The Taiwanese are smaller than people. And I can use the coffins for most folks. Nobody knows the difference. And I charge full price. So going back to what I said about this guy being a complete cheat with money, there you have it. He's charging people full price for the shit that he's paying half for. But wants to sit there talking about saving electricity and this and that. It's like, fool, please, you got the money if you're cheating people. I mean, this episode is insane. So Bobby continues to, just put up with it. Bobby is pretty much nice to Ezra the whole time. Including when we get to this very serious incident. So a mistake happens with a client's coffin. Ezra is telling Bobby to measure the client's son's body, which he does. And he measures the body and he clearly says that The coffin is supposed to be oak. For whatever reason, Ezra orders a pine coffin. When the client calls Ezra out on this mistake, oh, he blames Bobby. Of course he does, even though Bobby told him oak. What happens? After Ezra blames Bobby, he beats the ever-living piss out of the boy with a crowbar, causing an injury. And a doctor diagnoses that the injury is severe. It's a spinal injury, and he tells Ezra that, your nephew is never, ever going to be able to walk again. How did this happen? Of course, Ezra blames the boy, says it's his carelessness. He was playing on the stairs. If I told him once, I told him 1,000 times, don't be running in a house. And then says, he's an athlete. And the doctor was like, well, not anymore. So now Ezra has caused his nephew to never be able to walk again. This just angers Ezra because, now Bobby's no good to him, really. He can't work as hard. And it's really just costing him money. The doctor bills and all that, and it's just pissing Ezra off. It even gets to the point where, Bobby, he starts the episode off with a pair of Air Jordans. Bobby is looking for those after he gets attacked by Ezra. And he's like, where are my Air Jordans? And you know what Ezra says? I sold them. And I got a pretty good price for them, too. Claims this is just because his nephew's costing him money. I mean, I don't know why the hell you'd go sell some shoes. I guess if you're going to get the money for him, if you're dirty like Ezra is, I guess. So he claims he sells the shoes to pretty much pay for Bobby's doctor bill, which I call BS on. And this causes a big argument between Ezra and Bobby. This is where Bobby threatens to get the authorities involved. Ezra's like, well, then where are you going to go next? State hospital? So you remember that pine coffin that I was talking about earlier? That's still there because, Ezra had to pretty much order a brand new coffin. So the pine one is just there, just not being used. And also the pine coffin, this coffin was used for a guy that was smaller. Bobby's a taller guy. I think Bobby's over 6 feet tall. And the person that it was for, I think he was about 5'6". So keep that in mind. So we see Ezra looking at the pine coffin and realizing, I can't just let this thing go to waste. Which gets us to our next scene. Bobby is downstairs, finishing up Ezra's work. Mind you, this boy's on crutches. So he must use those crutches to get all the way down the steps. Now he's struggling to get up the steps. He's sweating from the head, everything. He gets to the top of the steps, and what do we see? Ezra shows up with Bobby's basketball. And is trying to talk nice to Bobby all of a sudden, and Bobby was like, how you doing, Uncle? What are you doing with my ball? Ezra takes the ball and smashes Bobby in the face with the ball. Bobby falls down the stairs. This kills Bobby. Falls and breaks his neck. Now, I'd normally make a separate article on kills, but this is really our only kill up until the final scene. So I feel like I can't really break that one down into a kills category. So Ezra embalms Bobby with water, of course, and takes him upstairs to stick him into the pine coffin. The problem with that, Bobby is a tall kid. He does not fit in the casket. So Ezra comes up with a clever idea to cut off Bobby's feet with a power saw. So he'll fit into the casket. So finally we see that Bobby is fitting in the casket now. We cut to the scene where Ezra, the doctor, and Clyde are lowering the casket into the ground. The doctor goes, isn't this strange that he should happen to fall down the stairs again, Mr. Thorntonberry? And Ezra's like, well, it happened for the better. He would have made a miserable cripple. The doctor flat out calls Ezra out on his bullshit and says, that's an awful small coffin for a boy so tall. And this is when we cut to Clyde quitting. He tells Ezra, I'm not doing no more work, I'm quitting. He said, I know that boy did not die, no accident. I know it, he was nice, but I can't prove it. Sets his keys onto a coffin and leaves. And for some reason, Ezra calls him a pervert before he leaves. I don't know why the hell he called him that. I really don't. I just felt like it was very random. This takes us to Bobby's revenge, the final scene. So Ezra gets woken up by a door knock. He answers the door, nobody's there. As he goes back in the house, we get lights flickering off. We get like dripping noises where the faucet was left on. Also, there was a scene earlier in this episode where Ezra smacks Bobby because the faucet is dripping. So I think this is why this happened. And it's basically just a bunch of mind games while Ezra's in the house. Even a basketball comes dribbling down the steps. Ezra picks up the ball and he hears a light cut off in the basement. He goes over to the door, looks down the steps, and all we see is a pair of Air Jordans kick Ezra right in his ass as he goes flying down the steps. When he sits up, he can't stand. His legs are completely like numb. He says, I can't feel my legs. Like we're supposed to feel sorry for this jackass. So then we see the shoes, just the shoes, no body, just the shoes and some severed feet. Walking down the steps, which Ezra grabs one and tosses it, but then we see a door open, and it is actually Bobby as a ghoul with no feet, and he's on crutches. So he uses the crutches to get down the steps. We do see that he's holding a crowbar. And Ezra's just freaking out at this point. And Bobby looks into Ezra's face and says, like it says in the Bible, Uncle Ezra, blood is thicker than water. We get organ music playing. Ezra begging for his life. Somebody help me. And Bobby raises the crowbar and swings it toward the camera. And this is our final scene in the episode. I really wish we could have seen Ezra, like, get the hell beat out of him. But it fades to black, and then we get the Crypt Keeper wrapping up with this final phrase. Now, it's like I said, there aren't very many kills in this episode, so I really cannot do a review on just that category. What we did get was pretty much just the basketball shot to the face because, you know, Bobby's kill on Ezra is pretty much off screen. So we only get one kill in here, but that's fine. I mean, with 30 minutes, this is more about the suspense. Sometimes these episodes are about what you leave to the imagination. So, I mean, it works. It's fine. I do wish we could have seen the kill. So now we can get to the acting. The acting in this episode is okay for the most part, but we do have one character in this episode that completely steals the show. But I feel like I need to save that for the star/MVP section of this review. The acting from Clyde was fine. I do think Bobby's acting was a little questionable in some spots, especially the scene where he has to play dead. I feel like I really could have, I saw him move. And then the lady that's in the casket at the opening, you can actually see that woman breathe. I thought the doctor did a fine job. I mean, there really isn't a ton of characters to really, you know, you can't really explain it one by one because there's not a whole lot of characters in this episode, nor does it need to be. So with that being said, I'm going to get right into who is the MVP of this episode. Guys, I got to come right out and say it. As much as I absolutely hated the character in this episode, the best acting performance of this episode is absolutely Moses Gunn as Ezra Thornberry. This guy completely steals the episode. This acting is incredible. I don't think I've ever hated a character more than this guy. But you know, that's his job. But the thing about it is, he's got some lines that just, they're funny. And like, I find myself repeating these lines a lot just for laughs. This guy definitely did his part, and I see why he got the role. Completely steals this episode. And I really don't think I've seen Moses Gunn ever put on a bad performance. But I do believe that this is one of my favorites. And mind you, this is only a 30-minute episode. But he completely steals the episode. I definitely got to give the MVP award to Moses Gunn as Ezra Thornberry. This was awesome. So I guess the only thing left for us to do with this episode of Tales from the Crypt is to give it a final score. What do I give Tales from the Crypt Fitting Punishment? I'm going to give this episode a 4 out of 5. I absolutely love this episode, and I do recommend everybody who loves this show, check out this episode for sure. I probably could have given it a higher score, but this is solely based on the fact that there was just one character in this episode that really just steals the entire show for me. Maybe if I'd have gotten some better acting performances from the actor who plays Bobby, I probably could have bumped this up a bit. And also, you got to remember, Tales from the Crypt episodes, they're only 30 minutes. You know, they're short, which is fine. That's all you need for Tales. They're not full-length movies, so sometimes these things are hard to review. But I do recommend that you guys check out this episode. Or have you seen this episode? If you've seen it, do you agree with my score? 4 out of 5. Do you think it should be higher? Do you think it should be lower? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you like this review, go ahead and hit that like button and please subscribe. I'll catch y'all in the next video. Peace.